Hey y'all, who dat and what is up? I'm Jeff Nowak, and this is a live edition of Inside Black and Gold coming at you on Thursday ahead of week 1 against the Carolina Panthers. Normally, this would be our Wednesday episode, but scheduling conflicts, whatever, threw us into the lurch, and we are here on Thursday instead. But this will be our week 1 preview episode. I'm going to bring on Steve Geller and Desmond Johnson of the Believe in Carolina Panthers podcast in the second segment to break down what we expect to see, what is going to go down in week 1, what the feelings are over there in Carolina. They might be better than you expect them to be, and they might maybe even better than maybe even better than we have over here with the Saints. I don't know. People seem pretty negative right now, so we'll have to see how that all plays out. But in this episode, I'm going to do that. I'm going to talk to Desmond and Steve. Okay, let's go back. We're going to do all that. We're going to talk to Des and Steve. Going to also have a live mailbag in the final segment of the program. So if you have comments, questions, whatever, throw them in the chat, and we will get to as many in the back end of the program as we can. I'm going to keep starring them as we go. So just throw them in whenever you have them, and we'll try to get to whatever topics, whatever seems to be the most interesting thing of the day. We're gonna talk about it. Hopefully we can be at least mildly positive, considering we haven't played a game yet, but we'll have to talk about that. But in this first segment, I want to get into the injury report. There was one addition today that we'll have to talk about. So we'll dive into all that. Then I want to hear from Mark Schlereth. He was on WWL this week. He'll be calling the game this weekend against the Panthers. So his insight is interesting. And he talks about the Saints passing attack, specifically what the Saints have to do to unlock that passing attack with their wide receivers. So we'll talk about that. Then I also want to dive into what Klint Kubiak said about Trevor Penning today. I got to chat with Trevor in the locker room, got some insight on where he feels like his game is right now and what we'll be watching on Sunday when he takes the field, because he will be the starter lining up over most likely Jadeveon Clowney, at least the majority of that game. So we'll definitely have to talk about that. But let's dive into the injury report as it stands. We've gone through 2 days of this, right? 2 days of the injury report. One change today is that wide receiver A.T. Perry was added. He was not on the injury report Wednesday. He is now on the injury report with a hand issue, and he did not participate in Thursday's practice. We did see him in the locker room. He had a cover on it. It looked kind of cast-like. I don't want to call it a cast because it's tough to, when you say cast, that implies a certain thing, but it was kind of braced. So we'll see if that kind of develops into something. If he can't go, that might mean a bigger role for a guy like Bub Means, a guy like Mason Tipton. I would have initially said, hey, these two guys will probably be inactive, but if A.T. Perry's unable to go, that does open up some opportunity for those young guys. So that'll be one to watch. The guys who were on the injury report and participated: linebacker Pete Werner, shoulder injury. He was a full participant both days. Linebacker Willie Gay, he missed practice on Monday, came back Wednesday, dealing with a back issue. He's been limited both days of practice. Marshawn Lattimore, dealing with that hip issue. He was limited on Wednesday. He was a full participant on Thursday. Got a kind of glowing review from defensive coordinator Joe Woods. Said that he's been locked in. He's been doing a lot of work after practice, staying late, getting all that in. So hopefully that's a good sign that he's ready to go. And we're going to get peak Marshawn Lattimore, which I don't know if we've seen over the last couple seasons. Like, I don't know if even when he's been healthy, we've necessarily been getting peak Marshawn. So that'll be something to watch. Hopefully we do get peak Marshawn and we can go from there. Nick Saldiveri, calf issue. He's been limited both days. Those are the only players that were on the injury report and participated. 4 others are on the injury report and did not participate, and missing the first 2 days of practice of the week for these young players. At least 3 of them are young players. Doesn't bode well for their availability in terms of getting out there on Sunday. So we'll have to watch. But 2 linebackers, Jalen Ford and DeMarco Jackson. Jalen's dealing with a hamstring issue. That's one he's been dealing with for a while. And I would be stunned if he's out there. But he was at practice today, watching, not participating. DeMarco Jackson came down with that calf injury late in the week, heading into the final preseason game. He has not practiced since. He was DNP both days. I wouldn't expect to see him out there on Sunday. Colin Saunders also dealing with a calf issue. This was an injury he suffered the last day of camp on that Friday practice in the Superdome. Sounds like he's going to be out for a decent bit. We'll have to wait and see. He didn't participate either day. And then tight end Dallin Holker, ankle injury. He has been out there watching practice. He's been in uniform, not doing any work. So don't expect to see him out there. Some good names that are not on here. Mason Tipton, Kool-Aid McKinstry. All these guys that were dealing with things in camp and are fully participating now, not something we're worried about going forward. So that's a good sign that those guys are going to be able to get out there and contribute on Sunday if they're active. I wouldn't be surprised if Mason is an inactive player and you elevate some guys from the practice squad, but we'll have to wait and see. I would expect at least one offensive lineman gets elevated because having 8 on game day just doesn't feel like enough. I think you really want to have 9 just in case you get into the doomsday scenario where like 3 of your offensive linemen get hurt. And then I just think 9 is not, or I think 8 is not a good number in terms of feeling comfortable that you have enough players, right? Because guys got to go out there and do special team snaps, right? Guys got to block, guys got to line up on punts and kickoffs. So we'll see how that goes. But those are the injuries right now. On the Panthers side, you have tackle Josiah Neiman. I'm sorry, I butchered that name. Dealing with a tibia, was limited. Miles Sanders, running back, dealing with a finger injury. He was upgraded to a full participant today, so he's likely to go. Tight ends, Ian Thomas and Tommy Tremble, dealing with a calf and then back/hamstring for Tommy. DNPs both days. So the Panthers could potentially be limited at the tight end position if they can't get over these injuries. And then Troy Hill, a cornerback, was added to today's injury report with a heel issue. He was a limited participant. So that's the injury report. The Saints side of this does seem a little long, but I do feel like they're in a pretty good situation as it pertains to the injuries at this point, right? Like, we dealt with a lot of soft tissue stuff in camp, but the flip side of that is, okay, a lot of soft tissue stuff, but not a lot of impact stuff. You didn't see, last year, if you recall, like the second day of camp, you had already lost Trey Turner to a torn quad. You'd already lost Andrew Dowell and Eno Benjamin to ACL injuries, right? Like, you haven't seen any of that really. Trajan Jeffcoat is on IR with the elbow. Kendre Miller, who has been around, we've seen him, which is good, which is a nice thing. Dealing with that knee injury. Both guys are on IR, so they're not going to participate for a while. But Kendre is expected to return. He can come back ahead of week 5 at the earliest if he's ready to go. Looks like he's in a good spot to potentially take advantage of that. But that's it for injuries. So let's move on to the wide receiver room, and more importantly, the offense in general and how it affects the wide receiver room. Because one thing that we've talked a little bit about, probably not enough, is the importance of wide receivers blocking in the receiving game. And I thought Mark Schlereth really broke this down well. He went on WWL, talked to Mike Detillier earlier this week. And so let's hear what he had to say on the wide receivers, because he was asked about, okay, what are your expectations for Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed in year 2? And I thought his answer is pretty telling of where he kind of sees this going.
Well, I think the big thing is, with Klint Kubiak coaching the offense is, you got to be able to, and you got to be a willing participant when it comes to blocking. And, it's just funny. I just watched a play where Chris Olave, the effort that he gave on a little push crack on the inside on a safety who was rolled up, it just wasn't good enough. And so they make a play in the preseason. I think it was Taysom Hill carrying the ball at a tailback position, for no gain. And that's one of those things that's not going to fly. And it has to be one of those things where you have to understand globally the importance of the role of blocking as a wide receiver. And in this offense, and I played in this offense for a long time, and I've been covering this offense for a long time. I've seen the evolution of this offense for a long time. In this offense, if you're not willing to do that, like a lot of the big plays that you're going to make, a lot of the big time kind of explosive plays you're going to make are coming off that play action game. And so, you have to start understanding the global perspective of, if I get down here and root a guy out and I show people this on a consistent basis, when I do that and I'm faking it and all of a sudden I'm running a deep over or something of that nature, or some type of, pin flat or whatever I'm running, or I'm running some type of hide and I'm leaking out, these are going to get me these big time over the top touchdown passes, these things that go where I'm not covered and I got 20 yards of space. And that's this offense. And so some of that stuff is going to be, there's going to be a learning curve involved in that for those receivers because, I don't know how much pressure was put on them and how much of an impact and how much, that was preached to those guys. But that's going to be something that'll be interesting to see, do you want to be involved? Because there's a lot of receivers in this league that want to catch passes. All the receivers want to catch passes. But there's some guys that don't want to do the dirty work. And it's the guys who are willing, to sacrifice and do the dirty work. Those are the guys that make the big-time explosive plays because they sell it and it looks the same. And so everybody's asked to block, but there's a different level of expectation in this offense when it comes to receivers and what their role is in the offense in regards to the running game and how that benefits them if they really sell out, how that benefits them in the passing game.
Yeah, so again, that was Mark Schlereth on WWL breaking that down. If you want to listen to the full segment, you can go over to WWL.com. Broke down a lot of what the Panthers are going to be bringing in. Again, he's going to be calling the game on Sunday, so he's been doing a good bit of research into both offenses, both defenses, where everything kind of stands going into Sunday. But I think he made, the points he's making there are important. And we've talked to Chris Olave, we've talked to Rashid Shaheed, we've talked to all these guys about that part of the game, blocking. Because, we can say, hey, we want to use the play action. We want to get, the defense sucked up field so we can hit over the top and we can take advantage of the speed of Shaheed and Olave and whoever else. Well, in order to do that, you have to sell the play action, right? And how do you do that? Well, you run the ball, or at least you show run looks and take advantage of them. And the thing you have to do is make sure that your run looks look the same as your play action looks. Right? You can't take Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed off the field every time you actually want to run the ball, right? You're going to have to run the ball with them on the field if you want the defense to honor the play action when they are on the field. And that means these guys have to not only participate as blockers, but be successful in that, or at least put the, do the work. Do the dirty work, as Mark calls it. And, that's the way I talked to I can't talk today. I'm sorry. So I talked to Rashid Shaheed about last week. And, I kind of asked him, like, how much of that is just being willing to do it, wanting to do it? And he said, that's all it is. Like, there's no wide receiver in the NFL is going to be at an advantage when they're trying to block a linebacker. They're always going to be undersized. They're always going to struggle. You have to get in the way. You have to get in the way and not foul is also an important part. You can't be holding, and you can be a traffic cone. You just got to make sure that they can't go in a straight line to the guy with the ball, and you have done your job. Okay, so you got to stick your nose in. You got to be willing to do it. I do have questions if this receiving core is going to struggle as the season goes on in that department. As you start dealing with injuries, especially with the smaller build guys, does it become a little bit more difficult to commit? If suddenly you're dealing with an ankle injury and you have to go out there and try to block a linebacker, are you giving it the same oomph, the same juice as you were in week one? It's going to be something we have to watch throughout the season. But genuinely, when you watch Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave, understand that a major key to getting this offense to where it needs to go is those guys blocking at not a high rate, not an elite level, but at a commensurate level to force the defense to honor it, to force the defense to understand that just because Rashid and Olave are on the field, that you can still run the ball out of those looks. And it's going to be interesting to see how they use Cedric Wilson. The problem is you can't allow Cedric Wilson to become a tell in this offense where every time you put him on the field alongside of Olave or Rashid, that's when you're running. That's when the defense should be keying on a run. So just because he's a solid blocking wide receiver doesn't mean you can replace either of those two guys with the blocking wide receiver. One thing that Derek Carr has talked about, the receivers have talked about, everyone has talked about, one of the keys to this offense is everything looks the same for the first 5 steps. Right? You're not giving tells. You're forcing the defense to honor everything and try to make a decision. And that's the way you do that. So I thought that was interesting. And it's just going to be something to keep an eye on. Now, moving forward, one other subject we'll get into before we hit the break, we talked to Desmond Johnson, host of Believing Carolina Panthers. Also going to bring in Steve Geller. He's going to have something to say. But Trevor Penning, the guy, the big first-round pick that everyone has already given up on. Well, not everyone. The Saints haven't given up on him. And while you may think that unwise, you have to give the team credit for committing to the guy and allowing him the opportunity to grow. And I thought what Klint said about Trevor was telling of where the team is. What Klint Kubiak, the offensive coordinator, said about Trevor today is indicative of where they feel like he is coming. That the fact that they feel like there's growth there from, what was a pretty rough preseason opener to week one, where you think, hey, I think he can get the job done. We can figure it out. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe it's a dumpster fire and you have to change course immediately. But they're going to do what they can to gas him up and get him ready and get him confident. And we'll see how that goes. But this is what Klint had to say today.
I think he's, again, I've said this every time, and I mean it. Like he's doing everything we've asked him to do. He's a super coachable guy, and he's had some really good practices, and a lot can be said about where he started and where he's come from. And I'm really proud to get to coach Trevor and Rick Dennison and John Benton, and those guys have done a phenomenal job with him and with the whole offensive line. But he's earned the right to go out there and play really well on Sunday, and I'm looking forward to go and seeing what he does. But it's a 5-man show up there, and it's all 5 working together. It's not just him.
Yeah, and one thing I've said, I've said at least once. I don't know if I said it on the podcast. Now that I think about it, is who Trevor Penning's best friend is? It's the guy who has the locker right next to him, and it's Taliesin Fuaga, a guy who we have barely talked about all training camp. Like, think about that. The Saints have a rookie left tackle. They're going to turn to a rookie left tackle who didn't play left tackle in college. They changed his position. He was a right tackle. He's now playing left tackle. How much time have we spent talking about the fact that could go poorly? Right? Because it very, very much can. Taliesin Fuaga, as good as he's looked, could struggle. And I would argue probably will struggle at points. He's a rookie, right? Rookies struggle in the NFL. I don't care who you are. But how much time have we spent talking about that? Not much. He's been able to kind of toil in obscurity and get better and better and better without the lens kind of directed at him as much as it probably could be. So I'm sure he's appreciated that. But I did get a chance to talk to Trevor today. I haven't got the opportunity to go back and cut the audio yet. But one thing that I wanted to ask him. So he mentioned when he was talking to the media that he felt like in week 1 of the preseason, he was too hesitant. That was one of his big issues. And he saw that on tape. He did what he could to correct it. And I think you saw that. I think you saw him take some steps forward in week 2 of the preseason and week 3 of the preseason. And one of the issues was he was hesitant. And I asked him kind of what he meant by that. And it's what you would think, right? He felt like he was allowing the defensive player to initiate the action, right? He wasn't the guy who was getting there with his hands first. He wasn't the guy who was redirecting. He was the guy who was getting redirected. And it's like a lot of that's just mental. A lot of that's understanding that I need to be aggressive. I need to be mean. I need to be the guy that is imposing his will on that other guy. It's a little different in pass protection than it is in run blocking, but the same principle applies. Like, you cannot allow the defensive player to dictate what you're doing. You need to win. And I think we do see a little bit more confidence out of Trevor. He had some really nice blocks in that win over that game against the Titans. The Saints did lose that game, but his blocks are what keyed that Spencer Rattler touchdown drive that everyone loves so much. So we'll see. I do think that there has been some confidence growing with Trevor, and that is what you want to see. The approach from Klint Kubiak that we just played, right? Like, that's important in terms of, okay, how do you build up confidence? How do you gas up a guy? Now, if it gets to a point where you can no longer play him, you have to be willing to pull the trigger there as well. And Oli Udoh is kind of waiting in the wings if they have to do that. But for now, they're going to give Trevor a chance, and we'll see how that goes. I think they're going to scheme up some ways to help him. I don't think they're going to leave him on an island against Jadeveon Clowney all night long. I think they're going to find ways to chip. They're going to find ways to put a tight end over there majority of the time and see how that goes. But that's going to be like has been all camp, all preseason. There's going to be a microscope over that right tackle spot, and there's going to be no hiding. It's going to be no hiding for Trevor from the people watching, from the opponent. He's going to have to deliver. And like I said, I don't need him to win every rep. I just need him to be neutral a majority of the time, right? Like you can't, even when you lose reps, you can't lose full sell. You call them lookout blocks because all you can do is yell look out to the quarterback, right? Like you can't lose that way a high frequency of the time, right? Like if you lose and it doesn't affect the play, or you're able to at least slow a guy down enough that the quarterback's able to get the ball out, you can live with that. That happens in the NFL, right? Offensive linemen get by like that all the time, and we never find out about it because it didn't impact the play, right? We're following the ball. We're not following the defensive end who almost got there, right? So you need to see more of that from Trevor. I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic that he's going to continue to grow and he's going to continue to develop because the talent's there. Like the ability's there. It's so much of it's mental for him, and we'll have to see. But all right, let's wrap up this segment of Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. Steve Geller is going to join us in this next segment along with Desmond Johnson, host of the Believe in Carolina Panthers podcast. I do want to say thank you to all of our listeners. We actually set a record on Tuesday, which was the first episode of the week that we published. It was our biggest download day locally. We had one day where we, after Derek Carr got signed, we got a bunch of like Raiders listens. So that was technically our number one day, but I don't count it because it wasn't local listeners. It wasn't people listening for the Saints. It was a bunch of Derek Carr fans coming in and listening to the podcast. But we set a record for kind of local listens earlier this week. And I do appreciate it. It's always interesting to me to see, who comes back. Because I know a lot of people listen during the off season, but I know there's also a good percentage that kind of checks out and says, okay, I'll be back when the season starts. And so we always see a good influx of folks coming in. So it's nice to see that number continue to rise year over year. It makes me feel like we're doing something right. So again, thank you to everyone. Thanks for our new listeners. Thanks for our returning listeners. If you haven't yet, please subscribe. If you haven't today is not my day. If you haven't left us a review on Apple Podcasts, please do that. Give us a rating. Let us know what you think. I really do. I read all of those reviews. I take your input to heart, right? Like I do try to incorporate what y'all are asking for into the show as much as I can. So again, that feedback's really valuable to me. You can find me on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. DMs are open there as well. So if you want to reach out, I know a lot of folks already have, and I try to be as responsive as possible. Sometimes I have to cut it off because I'm going to sleep or something else, right? But again, thanks everyone who listens. Thanks everyone who reaches out. We'll be coming back again with a breakdown of week 1 and the Carolina Panthers. And then we'll be closing out with a mailbag. So I've seen some comments in there. I'm going to go in and star whatever makes sense to hit. And if you have any more throughout the course of this next segment, toss them in there and we'll get to as many as possible to close out the show. Who dat? We will be right back. And we are back here on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak, Steve Geller, also back. Our preview episodes, and also back Desmond Johnson, host of the Believe in Carolina Panthers podcast. He co-hosts with Jonathan Stewart and Skylar Callahan, Panthers beat writer. Des is also the owner and operator of Tobacco Road Sports Radio, and we're going to get the lowdown on what to expect from the Carolina Panthers. These early season matchups are always so funny to me because everyone who's not watching that team like a hawk is basing all of their prejudices on what happened last year. And with a team like the Panthers, a lot has changed. There's a new head coach in there, and it's a guy I like in Dave Canales. And I think the Panthers are in an advantageous situation, because if you're going to be bad, it always helps when you change the deck around going into year 2. So, Des, what is your read on this Carolina Panthers team the Saints are going to host on Sunday at the Superdome?
Hope. They have hope again. That's the number one thing. I think. And the hope is a dangerous thing. You Saints, I know Saint fans have gone through it before. You guys have had some seasons where, you get the week 12, week 13, and like the games, they're not fun anymore. This is not fun anymore. It's like a chore. Like you just have to watch it so you can do your pod or whatever you need to do for it. But you got to sit there and watch the whole thing. You kind of know the outcome. That's where we were after like week 4 of last year. So we went through this entire season of just debauchery and nonsense, and then we find out that there's bickering back and forth on the coaching staff, on the offense, and assistant coaches are going behind Frank Reich directly to David Tepper, and we just found out Frank Reich didn't even put in like a shotgun until like week 2 or week 3 of the season. Like they changed the offense 3 different times during the year. So we've already given Bryce Young a mulligan on last year. Like it didn't even happen. Like we're just going to pretend like it didn't happen, because no one can be successful when you've got 4 different voices in your ear. You're a rookie quarterback trying to learn the speed of the NFL. You got 4 different people telling you 4 different things on how to run the same play. So there was times last year where, and you saw Bryce twice. There was some times where he'd come out of the snap and kind of leisurely, it would look leisurely, but I think looking back on it was more confusion. Like he's looking at something in Spanish and he doesn't read Spanish like out there. And he's just kind of trying to figure out what he's seeing. And he knows some words, but not enough to put the sentence together. And that would turn into either an offensive lineman getting shoved into him because they didn't know where he was in the backfield, or he gets sacked, or he'd throw the ball away or run for his life. So nothing looked right, like on the offense. It can't be that. It won't be that with Dave Canales. It's not going to be worse than what it was last year. And the Panthers were pretty much in every game they played except for that Miami game that got snowballed away from them. And then I want to say it was Atlanta or somebody else where the scores kind of got away from them towards the end of the year. But for the most part, they were in rock fights all year because of their defense. Their defense finished top 5 yards allowed. So there's pieces here. There's talent here. There always was. The problem was in the coaching staff in the front office, which is different in the NFL. Typically, it's going to be personnel is your problem. Like you don't have enough talent, and depth is an issue for the Panthers. But to say that they're a true 2-15 team because they're devoid of talent, I don't think that's accurate at all. I think that they just were rudderless last year. Like I've never really seen a team that just had no direction, like at all. And it showed on the field with Frank Reich losing his job after 11 games or whatnot. I've joked that he was kind of like the grandpa that everybody left the kids with as they went off to a movie or something. And the kids just destroyed the front yard. And he's just sitting out on the porch watching them do it because what's he going to do? He's the grandpa. Like he'll just take care of it after the fact. That's kind of what Frank Reich was doing last year, which is why you didn't really see a whole lot of fuss when he got fired. He was probably relieved at that point. But this is a whole new regime. This is a whole new team. There's 23 new players on this team on the 53 from last year. So this is not the Panthers from last year. Yeah, this is a completely flipped over roster by Dan Morgan and Dave Canales.
I know a big change. Obviously, they invested a lot up front on that offensive line and really needed to. Just what are the impacts so far you've seen from that investment? Has it been paying off for them?
Those are big men. Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt they are gigantic. They are space eaters. And when you can make Austin Corbett, who's moved to center, when you can make him look little, because Austin Corbett's not a small man, you've done something. And they've paid over $100 million for these 2 guys. So that was their core. That was their first 2 signings. When Canales came in and Morgan became the GM, they wanted to fix the defensive line. They wanted to fix the offensive line and build from within. And that's exactly what they've done. You guys would know, being Saints guys, the best years of your offensive line was when you had Drew Brees and you had those 2 all-pro guards and a center in front of him to solidify that front so he could actually build that pocket. Bryce didn't have that last year. He was getting linemen getting shoved into that pocket, and he didn't really know where to go with the ball after the fact. It's coming out faster. Canales is preaching 2.7 or less, and from what we've seen so far from Bryce, he's really adapted that. Bryce is starting to do stuff like anticipate windows and stuff that you would expect from a top quarterback coming into the league. He's throwing the spots. He's not throwing. Last year he was throwing the players, and they weren't open, so separation was an issue. This year he's throwing the spots, and when they played Buffalo in preseason week 3, we got a chance to see the starters for a drive, and they went down and scored a touchdown, and it was a mix of run, pass. It was amazing as a Panther fan and reporter to see some pass plays from the Panthers a couple weeks ago where the wide receivers were wide open. Like they were open. Like we weren't used to seeing that, where there's no one in the frame. It's just Adam Thielen, like in the middle of the field, and there's no one there, and he's got room to run. It's like it looks easy again. It looked hard last year for Carolina to just get down the field to be able to kick a field goal. That's not going to be the instance this year. Like it's Carolina. I really feel like it's going to sound like a homer, but I feel like Carolina is the one that can have that Houston leap this year. Wow. From 2-15 to middle of the pack, or even this division's weird. Like even 9 wins could probably win the NFC South. So you go 5-1 or 4-2, whatever in the division, you kind of set yourself up for maybe hosting a playoff game. Like it's wild, but it's not out of reach. Again, Houston did this last year, and just really, if you think 18 months before that, we were talking about how Houston was a wasteland. Nobody wanted to go to Houston, like with the stuff with the owner and Deshaun Watson and everything else. Now they're getting picked as a Super Bowl contender, like literally 2 years later. Like, so things can change really fast in the NFL. And if you already have a number one overall pick at quarterback in his second year and a support system around him, we're just starting a year later than we should have with the Bryce Young experiment, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it makes it really easy to kind of look down on a team when they finish with the number one overall pick and then don't get to make it. But that's not the current regime's problem, or at least not the current coaching staff's problem. That's David Tepper's problem. But
right.
I think they handled it pretty well in terms of the players they brought in. Obviously, they spent a lot of money on the offensive line. But, I do find it interesting because, and I've felt this way about Sean Payton in the past too, is he gets this reputation of being a quarterback whisperer. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that's necessarily the same thing as being a developmental guy when it comes to the quarterback position. Like you look at Sean, like what has he done to develop a young quarterback? I'd say nothing. Like, and we're looking at him with Bo Nix now and saying like, oh, it's for sure that this is going to work out. He's never had to sit through a rookie quarterback. He had Drew Brees. Last year he had Russell Wilson. That didn't go well. Dave Canales is kind of in a similar situation. He went to Seattle and he had success with Geno Smith. That was a reclamation project. It wasn't a young player developing. He went to Tampa, had success with Baker. Again, a reclamation project. Now he's going into Carolina with kind of a reclamation, but not really. It's 1 year. It's more of a developmental question than a reclamation question. What is your kind of initial read on Dave? I've been impressed with what he has done. Generally speaking, he seems like a guy that players really kind of gravitate towards from a coaching perspective. He's got that personality that I wish Dennis Allen had. But what is your read on Dave to this point?
Man, Dave Canales, I've said it before. I may have said it with you guys, but he is that type of personality that doesn't need an alarm clock. Like he literally is the type that wakes up on his own like every morning because his mind just can't wait to start off his day in his world. Like he's that positive. And in the very beginning, it kind of came off like there's no way this dude could be this positive all the time, but he is. He really is. Like that's him. And he's a player's coach. The players adore him. They love him. They will run through a wall from him. And the difference with him, we were talking about this on Believe in Panthers Tuesday. Dave Canales, his coaching style is different than say like a Bill Belichick or the old guard where it was like tough love type stuff. Dave is the type where he will tell you, this is the drill we're running today. This is why we're running the drill. And this is what we're going to achieve by completing this drill. Like he'll explain to the players why they're doing something as opposed to just doing it. And trust me, this is going to work if we do it right. And it gives the players ownership, and the players, especially the veterans, they love the fact that, okay, so we're going to do this Oklahoma drill, whatever. Why? Oh, that's why we're doing it. Or we're going to do this 2-minute drill in the red zone today. Why? That's why we're doing and they're getting that explanation. So Dave is I'd call him one of these new breed coaches, one of the younger coaches like a Sean McVay or a Mike McDonald or someone that's kind of doing it a little different than their predecessors would have. And it's a little jarring here in Carolina because we're used to having defensive guys be our coach really throughout our entire history, from Dom Capers all the way down to Ron Rivera. The formula here has typically been defense with a defensive head at front. So your offense is a bit conservative. With Dave, it sounds like it's going to be kind of still the same, but a little bit flipped, where they are going to be very heavy on the run. He's mentioned that so many times now, and I do believe him on that. Finally, a coach here is like, we're going to run the ball, and they're actually going to run it, which will help protect Bryce. Bryce is going to become this guru at this quick, almost West Coast offense type of passing game. Where the key is to get the ball out to your guys in spots and basically conduct the offense. Bryce can do that. He can do that. He won a Heisman doing that. So that's not a problem. They've got two capable running backs. I'm really interested in seeing Miles Sanders in this offense because they paid him $25 million, and he was just kind of lost in the sauce last year. Yeah. But now we know why he was. Plus, we mentioned on Believe in Panthers at the end of the preseason last year, Miles had a hip injury and went into the season with it and never was 100%. So people piled onto him because of the amount of money that he was getting paid, but the situation just didn't lend itself to help Miles Sanders. And now with a new regime coming in, I feel like Dave Canales kind of looked at the running back room and was like, oh, Miles Sanders is here. Miles Sanders is a great running back. We can use it. Oh, Chuba Hubbard's here. He almost rushed for 1,000 yards. You have stuff here. Like, we don't have to go rushing out. But let's just go get Jonathan Brooks in the second round just in case, just to kind of round it out. Like, they've thought of everything. And it's weird as a Panther fan for 30-plus years. It's only happened a couple of times where the regime kind of figures it out. And you're like, oh, okay, this might work. And we get it before the nation does. And by the time the nation catches up, they're 7-1 or 8-0. Like, where did Carolina come from? And like, we were kind of seeing all this happen, but it doesn't happen. So it doesn't happen frequently. So when it does happen, people are so shocked that Carolina's doing this. But I sense the same thing I sensed when Rivera was first here. It took Rivera a little longer to get it going, but same situation. You got a number 1 overall pick here. You're having to build around him. How are you going to build your offense? How are you going to build this defense to support that? Is the exact same situation. Bryce is just a half a foot shorter. So
it's funny. It's funny you mentioned that because, like, I feel the same way about the Saints. Like, even if the Saints did come out and have a decent season, no one would ever predict it because everyone's already so down on them and they're all just agreeing with each other. Yep. I feel like the Panthers are the same way. Like, no one nationally is going to come out and be like, I think the Panthers are going to surprise everyone, because it's just easier to be down on a team that has given you no reason to be particularly optimistic. And I think that's where the Panthers are. I just want to get kind of more insight on the run game. How do you see that backfield platoon kind of playing out? Because Miles did kind of get supplanted last year by Chuba Hubbard, but it does feel like he is still that guy. Like, you look at, okay, who is Miles Sanders and who is Chuba Hubbard? There should be a big role for both of those guys. How do you kind of see that splitting up this season?
It's funny because we had an opportunity to ask Jonathan Stewart this during our pod this week, and that episode's out right now on the Believe Network. And I asked him because I was like, look, the majority of your pro career, you shared a backfield with another running back, whether it was D'Angelo Williams or Christian McCaffrey later on. What it's like to share. What is it animosity between the running backs? Like, what is it? And he was like, no, actually, it's the opposite. Like, we understand as a running back room that we're a unit and fresh legs are everything, especially in the third, fourth quarter. And he was like, him and D'Angelo they'd have like a look, like if D'Angelo got off the pile and had a certain like look on his face, like towards the sideline, he knew it was time for him to come in, and vice versa. And they were able to kind of meld that into one thing to the point where in 2009, they became the only duo, I think still to this day, to both rush for 1,100 rushing yards each in the same season in the same backfield, because they were able to do that. That's the same kind of thing I think Dave Canales is going to attempt to do with Sanders and Hubbard. And eventually Jonathan Brooks is going to get added to this rotation too. I think he's out for the first 4 weeks on the PUP list, still dealing with the injury he suffered in college, but he's coming too. He was rated one of the best running backs on the board in the draft out of Texas, was behind Bijan Robinson 2 years ago in Texas. And by all accounts, he's going to be really, really well utilized in this offense, but ventured back like a Derrick Henry getting 35 carries, that kind of thing. I think that's kind of gone. I think it's going to be by platoon at most places now. And I feel pretty confident in the running backs the Panthers have because of the offensive line they've built in front of them.
One thing, Panthers always a pesky opponent for the Saints. It's always a tough matchup.
Likewise.
And I always think about a pass rush, which was obviously not apparent at all last season. Where's that pressure and sacks coming from this season?
Probably. Well, the one thing I'm not concerned about is Ejiro Ivero's defense. The entire defensive staff was retained. They did lose Brian Burns. They did lose Frankie Louvu, but the people that he replaced them with were primarily guys that have already played in Ivero's system, whether it was in Denver or wherever. So it was kind of plug and play, and the system's not going to change. So I know they're harping turnovers this year. They really, it's all about the ball. They want turnovers. Josie Jewell looks like he's going to be a good replacement for Frankie Louvu. Plus, Jewell had his best seasons in Denver with EJ being his defensive coordinator. So he'll be able to slide right in and start right beside Shaq. We didn't have Shaq at all last year. He broke his leg the first game of the season.
I think it was against the Saints, actually. I think it was week 2 against the Saints.
No, it was a night game. So
yeah, it was week 2 Monday Night Football against the Saints.
It was early in the year.
I saw that close up. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a rock fight too. That was an ugly game. All of them were. I'm thinking about it, they were all about the same. It felt, we were joked about it too, where it was like, this is just Groundhog's Day. We're watching the same game over and over again every week last year. So we didn't have Shaq, didn't have Josie Jewell. They'll be fine. Derek Brown, in my opinion, is the heir apparent to Aaron Donald in terms of the defensive tackle guy and like the dude. And he broke the record for tackles for a defensive tackle last year. He's in the NFL top 100 by his peers right now, and he just got his back. So it's like, I think he's 24. He's on the verge of superstardom. Like Derek Brown, I've watched Derek Brown move grown men like out the way, like just literally like to be able to move a grown man out of his spot to another spot against his will. Derek Brown can do that easily. You put Ashawn Robinson beside him, who's another gigantic man. They're going to go with the whole run the ball, stop the run. And that's kind of what the Panthers mantra has been since its inception. We've no matter who the coach has been, when we have good teams, we have a top 10 defense, and we probably have a top 10 rushing attack. And regardless of whoever the quarterback is, if they can move the chains, Carolina's going to be a factor. And I see all those elements with this team now. Looking back on it last year, we didn't have it, or we were fooled by the fact that we were so happy Matt Rule wasn't here anymore. It could have been anybody. It could have been Jeff Nowak was the head coach of the Carolina Panthers, and we'd be like, "Yay, Jeff!" And we would have cheered it on, and then we would have just got to week 3 and be like, "This offense looks like the same thing it did in preseason. What's going on?" Like we would have had the same questions, but we tricked ourselves into just being blind towards it. This year, we've been more tentative because of what happened, and I got to admit, I can't find a whole lot of bad that I'm seeing coming out of the Panthers camp. It just feels like the whole stink of the past couple of years has kind of lifted. And Dave Canales,
I feel like you sound like very positive.
I am, and I'm very surprised that I am, because I didn't expect to be positive going into this season after last year. Like we were talking about it at the end of last year, like, oh, we got to do this again next year. Like this never ends. And now we're at a point where they had a good draft. Dan Morgan getting hired as the GM was the perfect selection because he understands Panther DNA. Like it really, you kind of want him to be a certain kind of player. That's Steve Smith, Moose Muhammad, feisty Jake Delhomme, kind of Cam Newton. It just they carry a certain, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but edge, something. Yeah. And Dan wanted that. Dogs is what he calls them. That's what Stu calls them. That's where he got it from. Just like cool dog. Name. And that's guys like Trevin Wallace, the linebacker they drafted in the 3rd round. Keep an eye on him. He is a guy that I think just flashes off the screen. He intercepted Aaron Rodgers in our joint practices a couple weeks back. From Kentucky, long, fast, athletic, can get all over the field. He won't probably start because he's got Shaq and Jewell in front of him, but he will get on the field. He will be playing, and you will remember this conversation. Like he told us about this kid. Like he's the one out of this draft class for Carolina. I feel like you might see a little bit of him Sunday. So keep an eye for him.
Yeah, just a couple notes, and I'll definitely let you go here soon. But one of the reasons I appreciate having you on is because you will tell us if you're just completely down on the Panthers. It's not like this starry-eyed idealist. They'll figure it out. And it kind of feels similar right now, where you have a lot of Saints fans, and they're like anyone but DA. But like the Panthers are a perfect example of like, well, it can get worse. It's not a guarantee that things get better. Like they found a way
get worse.
To get worse. You mentioned the Jonathan Stewart, D'Angelo Williams first 2 backs to run for 1,100 yards in a season. I found, that's interesting to me because I remember vividly 2008 final game of the season. D'Angelo Williams led the league in rushing that year. And in the final game of the season, Derek Ward ran for over 200 yards in that crazy overtime game where the the Giants actually clinched home field advantage in the playoffs in a bye week. And the Brandon Jacobs and Derek Ward ran for 1,000 yards each, or like the 5th group of teammates to do that. Then the next season, that was the Jonathan Stewart, D'Angelo Williams 1,000-yard season. I just thought that was interesting. Like
smash and dash, like
demarcation. You talked about Ejiro Evero. Am I saying his name right?
Ejiro. I messed up for a whole year. Yeah, Ejiro Evero.
Ejiro Evero. I was talking to Derek Carr in the locker room. He actually told me that he and Evero are actually good friends. They from not even as teammates. Usually when you hear people say like, "Oh, I know this guy," it's because they played together or he was a coaching staff on this team. That never happened. They don't have any links there. They actually went to the same church in the Bay Area.
Wow.
And they've been good friends throughout Derek's entire career. And Evero's entire career. It's just kind of an interesting connection that I didn't realize existed. I don't think they're going to take it easy on each other, but
I was like, I hope EJ kind of lured him in so he could kind of figure out some.
Maybe that's why he's had so much success, right? He's been sneaking information from behind the scenes. But no, we haven't talked about Clowney yet. I think Chase Young and Jadeveon Clowney are actually two really interesting players in the sense that I think they're very similar. Both were top picks. Both were guys that you just don't need to ask many questions about. You just need to stand next to them and look, and you're like, okay, I understand why this guy was a number one overall pick or a number two overall pick. They're both 6'5", 270, just behemoths of human beings. Jadeveon is a little later in his career. Obviously, he's kind of heading home, from where he grew up, and he's in Carolinas now. He's 31. What are your expectations for him? And is he the guy on the defensive line that teams should be worried about?
Well, it depends. For pass rush, then it's going to be Clowney, and then they'll probably do some exotic stuff like blitzes and things. Maybe Wallace, like I mentioned, or you sending somebody from the linebacking core in there. On defensive line wise, though, I'm still going to go back to Derek Brown. I think Derek Brown is the one that the teams are going to have to focus on because he's just going to disrupt everything in the middle of your line, and he's almost unguardable at times. So I would go with him. If Clowney was 8 years younger, then yes, I'd be like, you need to focus on Clowney and yada, yada, yada. But I think he's going to be used more situationally. I don't think he's a 3-down guy at this point of his career. He probably can in spurts, but I wouldn't expect that for 17 games from Clowney. So I feel like they're going to rotate those guys and keep them fresh. But the name on the defensive line for me to tell everyone to watch is Derek Brown. Derek Brown is next. He's the guy that everyone needs to focus on. He's going to be the guy that you guys are going to be double teaming. I don't think you'll be double teaming Clowney unless he just goes off early, but it should be in the game plan to double team Derek Brown from Monday, on to this week. He's the guy you need to key on our defensive line. And again, he's 24, I believe. I don't think you can name 3 or 4 defensive tackles in the league better than him before you land on Derek Brown. So, and they built around him. That's why they gave him the money this offseason and extended him. They're building that defense around Derek Brown in the front and J.C. Horn in the secondary. And you're talking about 2 top 10 overall draft picks that are finally, hopefully, with J.C. Horn, hopefully he's able to stay on the field. Yeah. They'll be able to anchor this defense and go forward from there. And that'll be a key part of the Panthers.
Definitely awesome stuff, Des. Appreciate the time for sure.
Hey, good luck to you guys. Hey, everybody's 0-0. Everybody's relatively healthy. So just good luck to everybody. And again, the NFC South is going to be nuts. I think it's a race to 9. The first team to 9 is going to probably win this division. And somebody, somebody, we're going to host a playoff game. So it's just
going to happen.
Just think about that. We could be 6-11 or whatever and hosting the playoff game. So just. Yeah.
I'm glad you made that 0-0 note because a lot of times it feels like I'm talking about an 0-4 team when I'm talking about the Saints right now.
We haven't even started yet. Yeah.
That positivity that you have right now, we're trying to influence Saints fans right now because it's been a rough offseason here.
Everyone's 0-0. Let the team bring you down. Don't let Thursday bring you down. Let the team mess up and bring you down on their own. That's what I've learned as a Panther fan. Don't sit around and expect it to happen. Just wait for it. Wait for it to happen. And when it does happen, then you're like, okay, now this is familiar.
I knew it.
Yeah.
Team's going to ruin your weekends consistently enough on their own. Don't do the work for them.
Just let them ruin from 1 to 4 on Sunday and then go from there. But somebody's going to emerge happy out of this division. I just have no idea who. So.
Right. Well, thanks as always, Desmond Johnson, host of the Believe in Carolina Panthers. Host that with Jonathan Stewart and Skylar Callahan, Panthers beat writer for Sports Illustrated, also owner-operator for Tobacco Sports Road Radio. Thanks again, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
You the man, Des. Thanks. Man, all that positivity's got me nervous now about Sunday. I was like, man, they're coming in here thinking, all, happy and thinking about the improvements they've made, and we're wallowing in, Spencer Rattler should be the starter or Derek Carr by midseason is going to get benched.
The new coach, man. It's the new coach effect, right? Again.
But that wasn't the feeling, though. You saw. It was like with Frank Reich. Nobody was excited.
It was in the
that.
preseason. It was in the preseason. And thanks again to Des for coming on. Always good info. And I will say, if you want to go back to week, I don't know, whatever week it was, he came in here being like, I am miserable watching the Panthers. They are terrible.
Right.
And, so he'll be honest. If he's down, he'll tell us. So I do think it's interesting. You go around and you kind of hear from people in their own markets, and it feels different than what you'll hear from anyone else talking about them. And I think that's true of the Saints too. I think the Panthers and the Saints are in very similar situations. Like I said, not so much in the sense of like, oh, the Panthers have a new head coach. The Panthers have a former number 1 overall pick who they feel like was let down by the staff last year and has a chance to kind of deliver on that upside this year. And I think it's fair because we're way too quick to quit on young quarterbacks, I think. Now, some never figure it out. Some do. But you have to kind of wait and see. That said, we'll see if that optimism is realistic. I think that it is a little unrealistic to try to turn around the situation they had in 1 year, but it can happen. The NFL is a league where that can happen because the difference between the worst team and the best team is as close as you'll find in any sport anywhere.
I like he said, I think that riding high, looking at what the Houston Texans did, you got to have that kind of optimism, I guess, for your team.
You don't have to. But it's nice.
You don't have to.
It's nice when you do. And that's why, I don't think the Saints were wrong to not fire Dennis Allen after last season. I don't. Just because of the scenario you were in, I don't know if I can find an example of a team firing a coach in that scenario. That said, I think there would be a different tone around this team, earned or not, if there was a different head coach right now. Because that's just what happens when you change things up. People, like, there was a graphic that went up this morning and I retweeted it. It was like confidence level of teams going into this season. Yeah. And the Panthers are a lot higher than the Saints. And a lot of it is based on like how much do you believe in your head coach and your quarterback? It's not really about the team. It's about belief in those two people. And the Saints and Giants are at the bottom of that list. And it's because Daniel Jones and Derek Carr have become the punching bags of the NFL from the quarterback position. Now, is that necessarily fair? Who's to say? But there's no questioning whether it's true. It's objectively true, right? Like you bring up those two names and people laugh.
For sure.
Now, are there worse quarterbacks in the NFL? Absolutely. But the fact remains that if you don't make changes and you feel like you're stuck in this kind of mediocre cycle, you're going to lack confidence from the fan base. And vice versa. Like the Panthers have their fans confident by no other reason than they brought in a new head coach and they kind of changed things up. And there's value in that. Will they deliver on it? I don't know. I'm still not sold on the Panthers. As confident as Dez is, I don't buy it. I'm not ready to buy it.
And you mentioned with the new head coach too, and I think he mentioned as well, it's that energy, that positivity he's bringing that kind of is infectious for folks and makes him appealing to fans, whereas DA just is not.
Yeah, no, and I get it. I do understand it, right? And we'll see it. We'll see how they feel in 8 weeks.
Sure.
Right? We'll see how they deliver on that. I think if there is a turnaround, I do expect it will take some time. I think the Saints are, if that Panthers team does deliver with some of the changes and some of the upgrades and a new offense and whatnot, I think it will take some time. I think the Saints will be catching the Panthers at the right time. And because the Panthers also don't know what the Saints are going to do. Like the Saints have a completely new scheme that they can't scout either. So I think the Saints are in just as good of a scenario from that perspective as the Panthers are. And the Saints have the advantage of kind of having that entrenched defense that you feel like has the kind of the rules to deal with whatever the Panthers are going to try to do. And the Panthers are kind of changing things up really to adjust, even though they do have the same coordinator and that was a solid defense. Although I will say before we go into it, there's all this talk about how the Panthers had a top defense last year. And that's true to an extent, but they also had like the 28th scoring defense, or like the 27th to 28th ranked scoring defense last year. And so it really depends on what metric you look at, because if you're talking about what matters, which is, allowing the fewest amount of points, they were a bottom 5 defense. If you're talking about yardage, which can be skewed by if your
field position.
If your offense is bad enough, you won't allow that many yards just because A, teams are running the ball in the fourth quarter and just kind of milking the clock, and B, starting with such great field position all the time that they don't need yardage. They just need to put it in the end zone. And that's really the explanation for the Panthers' yardage defensive mark. Because if you're allowing the 4th most points or 5th most points in the NFL, clearly the yardage isn't helping you. So I do think that's an overused statistic.
No, for me, it's definitely scoring defense. That's all I care about.
It has to be.
Right.
That's the point. It's like, okay, I led the league in passing yards, but I'm 25th in scoring. Like, fantastic. Like that's not how you win. How you win football games. So
no, I
we'll
do like the edge the Saints have on D for sure going into this matchup. That's no doubt.
Yeah. And we'll see, but I do agree with the fact that like the Panthers could surprise people, and I think the Saints could also surprise people, because anytime everyone agrees on one thing, I don't buy it. Because it's like at a certain point, it just stops being a nuanced conversation. It starts to be everyone looking at themselves and nodding in the mirror of like, I think this, so we all think this, and let's agree and move on. Because at a certain point, you just stop thinking about it in any sort of like analytical way, and you just are all group thinking your way to the end of this road, and that's never the case, especially in the NFL. So we'll see.
And man, as we know too, you hear it constantly over and over and over again. These NFC South opponents, it doesn't matter. It's a different vibe you get when it's a divisional matchup.
Yeah, and it's in the Superdome. Hopefully the Saints can give people some reasons to cheer and some reasons to not be. God, if I hear boos in week 1, it's just gonna be so sad.
I'm worried about that after the first series, honestly. If things don't go well and it's like a 3-and-out for the Saints offense, and it's like, oh crap.
If you go 3-and-out and hear boos after the first offensive drive of the season, that's just such a bad look. I don't know. But
just hoping they can change that energy, because right now it hasn't been favorable for the Saints going into this season, and it's sad because, like Des said too when we were talking to him, we're 0-0 right now. Everybody's on the same level, same plane, and leave the negativity till after the game at least. Go into everything. You got to feel positive about your team in the matchup, because hope springs eternal right now. There's no reason to be down on them.
Yeah, like I said, let's let them earn the negativity. It's because it won't take long if it happens, right? Like there's no like if you're going to be miserable because of the way the team plays, at least like there's no benefit for you being miserable now. Like try to enjoy yourself. Like why would you invite misery into your life when it's not even there yet?
I'm hoping it's like the movie Major League. The fans are booing, and then all of a sudden the team starts to look pretty decent. They're like, you know what? These guys aren't so bad.
Yeah.
And then it builds from there.
Charlie Sheen, we got to get him in the fold. Yeah, he'll get it going. But all right, let's wrap that segment up. We're going to come back with a mailbag. I'm going to come back with a mailbag. Steve's going to get the rest of the day off, and we're going to answer some viewer questions they've been building up throughout the show. We're going to dive into as many as possible before week 1. Saints, Panthers, get excited. Hobie Brenner's going to be there.
Oh, my goodness.
I think. Let me double check. He is the legend of the game. We're also going to have Jordan Davis performing at halftime. So there's stuff to get excited about. Let's do it. All right.
The Cajun Cannon talks about him as being like the best tight end he's played with.
Hobie?
Yeah.
Well, that's the funny thing is we talk about like Saints tight ends and how disappointing like Jared Cook was. I think Jared Cook might be the 3rd best Saints tight end of all time behind Jimmy Graham and Hobie Brenner.
There
like
you go, right.
The only other name on that list. And I'm like, yeah, okay, you can make an argument. Anyway,
Ben Watson, maybe.
He was fine, but he wasn't better than Jared. Why are we talking about this? Anyway.
I'm just thinking maybe as an all-around player, too. I just think about how much, Ben Watson was valuable in the blocking for run game, too.
I love me some Ben Watson, but statistically, there's no argument to be made that he was better than Jared Cook. But either way, why? That's not a debate we need to get into 35 minutes into this segment. We need to end this segment so we can come back with that mailbag. Who dat? Go Saints. This is Inside Black and Gold. Subscribe. We'll be right back. Hold on. I missed a button. There we go. That looks better. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. One more segment to go. I am Jeff Nowak. Thanks again or Desmond Johnson for coming on. Thanks to Steve for gracing us with his presence. If you're confused, we had to record that earlier in the day. So if you're wondering why that seemed like, hey, I didn't say as much as I typically do, is because I edited it first. That's fine. But this segment's going to be a live mailbag. I promise. I don't have like a newspaper to hold up, but I promise that I am live in person. We got a good number of questions in there. The first is relative to that random tangent we went on to close the show. And Pammy Whammy wants to ask Shockey ? And the question was, okay, who are the best tight ends of all time? Jeremy Shockey was a good tight end for the Saints. He was a very good tight end for the Giants. He played here for 3 years, caught 6 touchdowns. Jared Cook caught 16 in like 19 games or something like that. So we can keep going in on that. Hobie Brenner, really nice. He is still one of my all-time favorites. Yeah, Hobie, it's tough to gauge some of the older tight ends because the yardage won't stack up. But Hobie has the touchdowns. He was the touchdown king for those Saints teams, and yeah. And again, he was before my time, so and not a ton of YouTube clips from back then. So I'm going based on statistics here. I just think Jared gets a bad rap because of that fumble, and he dealt with some injuries. I think people forget how good Jared Cook was in that first season up until the 49ers game. If you recall that crazy 49ers game at the Superdome, he had 2 touchdown catches in the first quarter and then got concussed. Like he was on pace for a monster game, and then they took him out. It was actually the second touchdown catch that he got a concussion on, and I don't know if he ever was the same after that. He came back the next year. He was solid, but I didn't see the same level of kind of dominant Jared Cook. But he was really, really good in that first season that he was here. I think it was 2018. Yeah, that sounds right. But let's go back to the top. Let's hit on some of these questions to start a few of them. Pammy Whammy again says, prediction, how many yards and touchdowns will Derek Carr end with on Sunday? That's a tough one to do right now because I just don't know what this offense is going to look like, right? Like there's so many question marks in terms of, hey, can you run the ball? If you can run the ball well, then that number is going to be a lot lower. I guess you're talking around 200 yards. I'd like Derek to avoid throwing interceptions. I think that's going to be a big thing he has to do to make sure this team has the level of success that they can have. Is you can't have bad turnovers. And to Derek's credit, that's something he has done well, is avoid turnovers. I think he only had 8 interceptions last year. He got hit a bunch. He didn't fumble all that often. I think he had 1 lost fumble. He had that one against the Titans that probably should have been a fumble. But either way, I'd guess around 200 yards, 1 touchdown, 1+ touchdowns. I don't think this is going to be a high-scoring game just because of the way the Panthers play. They love this kind of zone shell defense. You got to throw everything underneath, beat them. It's like the death by 1,000 cuts thing, and you have to be consistent, right? And their gamble is that you will not be able to be consistent for 10-play drives, 70 yards down the field, going underneath every time. And a lot of defenses are doing that now, and some teams handle it well, some teams don't. If you can run the ball, which they're going to dare you to run the ball, you'll have success. So I think, in a perfect world, you wouldn't need Derek to throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns to win this game. You would run the ball for 200 yards and get Alvin into the end zone or get Taysom into the end zone. But it's a good question. There's a few in here that got to that. So let's see. Hold on. I lost it. Give me a second. How did I lose it? These are the type of moments that I cut out of the pocket. Oh, there it is. David Bordelon. It's 285 passing yards, 2 TDs for Derek. The only thing is, I feel like if you're throwing that much, then you're in bad shape in this game, is my only thing. Like, if this Saints offense is working, then I don't think you're going to see a high number in the passing yardage total. Although, again, this goes back to, I don't know exactly what this offense is going to look like. There's a chance that, you throw a 5-yard out and it goes for 60 yards, right? Like if this offense is working the way it's supposed to work, you're not going to see Derek throw the ball down the field, but you're going to see a lot of yak. And Derek's ability to put the ball in locations where the receiver can catch it and run is a big question that I have But I appreciate y'all chiming in. Interesting to go through. Daniel Blount says, did y'all see Derek did Gruden's new YouTube show? I did not, but I did see Derek went on Cam Jordan's podcast. He's making the rounds. I think Derek is making an effort to be more forward facing this year, more so than he probably did last year, in part because he was more focused on the team internally, right? And I do think that he's seen the error of that now, and he's trying to do his best to correct that. The funny thing to me is like Derek gets this bad rap of being like a me first guy. I don't see that. It's just really easy to kind of portray that image when you're not the one creating the image. Other people are creating it for you. I find Derek to be very, very outgoing and very friendly and very team first, generally speaking. Now, you don't have to agree with that. I'm just going on, he's always been good to me. He's always answered my questions honestly. It seems I imagine. I don't think he's lying to me. So we'll see. But yeah, I'd like to think that if Derek played the way he did to finish last season, we would get a different type of response to the quarterback as he is. My issue is I don't think we will. And that's a bridge we'll cross if we can cross it. I'm not even going to say when we do. I'm going to say if we can. If we get to a point where Derek's playing really well and this team is winning some games and we're still having these same conversations, then I will say, hey, this is not about Derek, right? This is about something else entirely. And we'll go from there. But, Daniel says he's put more work in this offseason. Derek said that. And we'll see. I think that he has said that multiple times. We'll see if that manifests. We'll see if that produces anything. But either way, appreciate the comment. Rich Vital says, my question is, what outcome in the game versus the Panthers would change what you believe about this season? I don't know. I think here's the thing, like what makes this kind of a must-win game, and this is a good question to kind of display this. What makes this a must-win game for the Saints is that there's really no positive outcome, or there really isn't going to be any positive change that can occur based on the result of this game, right? If you win a close game, everyone's gonna be like, wow, you got taken down to the wire by the Panthers, right? Now you'll have a 1-0 record, but everyone's going to be like, yeah, I don't believe it. If you win it big, everyone's going to be like, oh, congratulations, you beat the 2-win team from last year. Like you might get a little credit and people might start to look at you a little differently, but generally speaking, you won't get a ton of praise. You will get like, okay, yeah, you played the Panthers. Congratulations. Go to the Cowboys and lose by 30, right? Like that's what the conversation will be. If you lose this game, if you play a close game and lose, or God forbid you play a terrible game and lose by a lot, only bad things happen. Like it is a much greater negative outcome than you could ever. Like you could win by 60, and no one will look at it and be like, "Okay, yeah, that the Saints are going to do something this year." They'll look at it and say, "Okay, that was the free space in bingo." If you lose by any amount of points, it will be a disaster, right? You will get boos, you will get all sorts of negativity. Like if you think things are negative now, you lose to the Panthers, and it's just. The sky is falling after week 1. And that's not necessarily fair, right? Like it's a 17-game season and we'll be reacting to a loss as if it is the worst thing that has ever happened. But that's the way it is. And that's why when I say, okay, if there's ever been a must-win game in week 1, this is it. It's because of that. Because the negative output from this game, if you lose it, will be so exponentially big relative to the kind of okay, let's keep moving forward output if you win it. So it's a tough situation to be in. You almost wish you didn't have this game week 1 because I don't know, like it's kind of that high variability. It's a high variability week where you'll see results in week 1 that make no sense, objectively no sense by the end of the season. Case in point, go back to 2021 and look at the Saints in week 1 against the Packers in Jacksonville after being displaced by a hurricane. They take down the Packers 38-3, a Green Bay team that went to the NFC Championship that year and had Aaron Rodgers. You beat that team 38-3. The Saints kind of limped to the end of the season. They went 9-8. They missed the playoffs in a tiebreaker. Does it sound familiar? Yeah. So, it's tough. We'll have to see. They got to do it. They got to win. Wilson, Lehman Park says Cedric Wilson will be used like Juwan Jennings for San Francisco. Yeah, I mean, he's a blocking wide receiver. That's why he's here. I think, and I've said this, I think you probably should look more at Miami than San Francisco if you're trying to really figure out what Cedric Wilson's going to do in this offense, because I think Cedric Wilson in this offense will be used the way Cedric Wilson was used in Miami, because that's where he was last year. And I think that combination of Shaheed and Olave is a lot more similar to Tyreek and Jalen Waddle than it is to Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel and whoever else, right? Now you have Taysom Hill, and that kind of throws a Kyle Juszczyk element at you. But like, I think there's a reason Cedric Wilson is here, and it's because he's worked in that system and understands what they were doing. And a lot of that system is what you're going to bring into this system, or at least a lot of the concepts that they were using and all the motion. Like, that's something that you're going to bring here with a lot of the speed that you have. So, I mean, I think a blocking wide receiver is a blocking wide receiver, and he's going to be on the field a good bit, especially on like crack toss plays. He had a really nice crack toss block in the 49ers game, I want to say. No, yeah, I think it was the 49ers. Yeah, it was on that long touchdown drive by the first team offense. So, no, this team likes Cedric Wilson. I think he's going to be on the field a lot. And so it is going to be interesting to see how they incorporate him in the passing game. Liam Park again, he says, I'll say by week 4 it will resemble Frisco, but we need Carr to be an NFL quarterback for it to work. Yeah, I know you're not a Carr fan. I know. I just, it's funny because I think elite level quarterback play gets looked at as the only way you can win in the NFL. And the funny thing is, in a lot of cases, that elite level quarterback play is really just a quarterback trying to make up for deficiencies on the defensive side of the ball, right? Like when you see these big time yardage seasons, look at Drew Brees. You think Drew Brees throws for 5,000 yards if he has a defense that can stop anybody? And so like, that's kind of where you are. Like when you have an elite defense and you're talking about complementary football, I don't need Derek Carr to be a top 5 quarterback. I need him to be a top 15 quarterback. I need him to be above replacement level at the quarterback position. And that's why when we talk about the Saints and everyone's so down in the sense of like, they're going to be picking top 3, that's what I don't understand, because if nothing else, Derek is a pretty, what you're going to get out of him. Like there's a pretty stable idea of what he can do. So you can build around that. You can plan around that. Now, if you're getting these high volatility weeks where some weeks you're getting elite quarterback play and some weeks you're getting bench him and never look back play, then that's a problem. That's something that's hard to figure out. I actually think for a team that wants to win with an elite defense and running the ball and play action, he should be able to be a successful quarterback in that system. And you should be talking about this team. Like I was talking to, I think it was Luke Johnson at the facility today. And we were talking about like the idea that you look at the Bucs and what the Bucs have done and the Bucs kind of build and say, this is a team that could sneak up on people. They might surprise some people. They have a chance to do stuff. And you look at the Saints and say, no, this is a bottom of the barrel team that has no chance to do anything of merit, of anything meaningful. I ask, like, what's the difference between these two teams? Right? Like you're talking about Baker Mayfield and Derek Carr. Like, is that like they basically had the same statistical season last year? They're in very similar situations. They're the similar quarterbacks, right? You look at Todd Bowles and Dennis Allen. The only difference in their record really is Todd Bowles' team, which was led by Tom Brady in 2022, managed to come back from 16-3 down in the final 5 minutes of a football game at home at Raymond James Stadium against the Andy Dalton-led Saints. That Bucs team won 8-9 with Tom Brady as their quarterback and made the playoffs. The Saints went 7-10 with Andy Dalton as the starting quarterback, and obviously Jameis to start the year. And probably, if they weren't eliminated by week 18, probably, I mean, like, I don't know if you watched that Panthers game, a lot of the 31 teams could have beaten the Panthers that week. The Saints just had no motivation to go and win it. So like, but for what we're talking about the Bucs as if they're different. We're talking about Todd Bowles as if he's a success story when the only real difference is tiebreakers. And so that's why like there's this kind of disassociated idea of like, well, this is a team that has upside and can win. And this is a team that is all bad and has no chance to succeed. And I just think that's silly. It just doesn't make a ton of sense to me. But here we are, and I'm okay with it, right? Like, because I would rather be the team that no one's given a chance to. I would rather be the team that everyone is sleeping on, even though you're on the same level. You know, it gives you a lot of ammunition in the locker room to be like, hey guys, everyone is saying you're gonna suck, so go prove them wrong. Like, if you're a coach, those are the easiest pregame speeches in the world. You know, it's a lot harder to motivate your team when you're like, hey guys, everyone's giving you a lot of credit. Go prove them right. You know, like there's a reason Michael Jordan would literally make up things that other people did to piss him off, right? Like in the Jordan doc, there was I can't remember his name, but Michael Bentley maybe. He was like, there was a story about how he scored 30 points and walked off the court, and he said, "Good game, Mike," all derisively, and that's why Mike came out the next week and like dropped 40 in the first half and like ended the guy's career. And it turns out like that didn't happen. Mike Jordan made that up because he needed that extra motivation, and he's a crazy enough person that he was able to convince himself it actually happened. You don't have to do that when you're the Saints right now. All you have to do is like pull up Twitter for 7 seconds, and you will find a negative tweet about one of your players within the first 10. Doesn't matter who it is. Doesn't matter if it's Tyrann Mathieu, he's old, he's washed. Doesn't matter if it's Cam Jordan, he's old, he's washed. Honestly, Demario Davis, you probably won't find a lot of negativity about, but he doesn't seem to need it. Derek Carr, I mean, at least 1 in every 3 tweets, you could find a motivating take for him. So again, we'll see. I like stories where you're getting slept on and you overachieve. Hopefully the Saints are that team this year, and we'll go from there. Ransom Antoine says, would a close game against the Panthers foreshadow how the season will go since they're supposed to be bad? Honestly, no. People will take it that way. But here's the thing. In week 1, it's really survive and advance. It really is. Because you don't know exactly what they're going to be doing. It's a new offensive scheme. They don't know what you're going to be doing. And it's a lot of guessing. And you just need to get out of there with a win. Like I said, did the 38-3, I think you look at the Packers in 2022 and say, man, 38-3 loss to the Saints in week 1. That's probably bad, huh? They went to the NFC Championship that year. So realistically, go get a win. People will look at it negatively if it's like a 2-point game or a close game. At the end of the day, just go 1-0 and worry about the popularity contest afterward. Go win a game. I don't care how you do it. But I appreciate the comment. Pammy Whammy says Olave Rashid blocking is essential. We talked a lot about this, so I'm not going to get into it a ton, but agree completely. It really is, and we'll see. I think they want to do it well, and they're saying all the right things. So hopefully that does kind of manifest into good blocking at the wide receiver position, and that turns into an effective run game. That turns into an effective play action game, and we come back in week 6 and we're talking about, man, Chris and Rashid really delivered, and that's what helped unlock this game. This passing game, but we'll see. Lehman Park says Holker will be used like Kittle, Taysom like Debo, Kamara like Christian McCaffrey, Olave like Brandon. I think he means Brandon Ayuk. Yeah, I mean, it's really easy to look at players and say like this is going to be this guy. I don't think that's how the Saints are going to look at it. I think Taysom will be more like use check if you're trying to do that. I think he's going to be more of a running back. I don't think you're going to see as much of a pass catcher for I think you are going to see Taysom as a pass catcher this year, but I don't think you're going to look at him at the end of the season and say he's basically a wide receiver who can do other things. I think you're going to be talking about him more as like, okay, he's a running back who can split out and go in the slot and go out wide and do all these different things. But I think, last year we saw, I think it was a record year in terms of receptions and yards. I think this will end up being a record year in terms of carries, not necessarily quarterback carries, but handoffs and rushing yards. So we'll see. But I do think that is how it's going to work out. If we play our game, it should be a 14-point win, says Lehman Park. Man, what? Who is this? Who is this positive person? I don't know where you came from. You're so angry all the time. 14 points. Ooh. I guess the hate of the Panthers has trumped the anger of I don't like my own team. But we'll see. I'd love a 14-point win. That would be a lot of fun. It would be nice to see the Saints just go out and blow out the Panthers. and we don't have to have this conversation about, oh man, they really aren't good. They'd only beat the Panthers by 3 points, whatever. Like, I don't really care at the end of the day what the margin is, but it will be a much more comfortable conversation if they just go out and win going away. Honestly, even kind of like they did last year. Like, both of those games last year were close, but at the end of the day, the Saints were never really in danger of losing them. Like, the first game seemed a lot closer because there was that long touchdown at the end of the game, or that long touchdown drive at the end of the game. They didn't recover the onside kick. It didn't matter. The second matchup, they ended up winning by like 20, but it was close until the third quarter, and then it kind of got away. But so I don't know. I would love a 14-point win. All right. Lehman again says we can't double Brown because we got to help Penning. I don't think that's true. I mean, you can double on the interior and send a tight end. Like, you're talking about doubling, helping Trevor on the outside, and I don't think that's what you would do. You would talking about helping Trevor in the sense of like, oh, Cesar Ruiz is going to come out and double the end. I really don't think that's going to be the case. I think you can double Derek Brown, have a running back chip, have a tight end chip, and help Trevor protect the inside. Like, that's the issue with Trevor. Like, he's actually been decent in terms of speed rushes around the edge. Like, he's done a better job this year of his kick step, getting into his kick step and kind of angling off. And the issue has been, as he's really kind of hedged that way a little more, guys have beaten him inside. And so what the help on the outside does is it allows him to not have to sell out as much on the speed rushers, and he can protect his inside hip a little bit more. So that's what you're going to do. You're going to you're going to have the tight end over there a lot more, and you're going to run away from it, right? Like, you're going to, Cam Jordan talked about this, and I think Drew Brees talked about this at one point. Like, there's nothing more frustrating than for a defensive player than for a pass rusher than winning your one-on-one matchup clean and the ball's gone already before you can get there. Like, physically impossible to get to the quarterback before the ball is out. Like, I think, or it's a run play away from you, right? Like, I genuinely think that's what the Saints are going to be trying to do is get the ball out fast, be more like late career Tom Brady, as I think I said that in the last episode, and not put yourself in situations where you have no choice but to drop back and pass. We'll see how that goes. All right, we'll get to a couple more here. This has been going on for a long time. Pammy Whammy says, I have no expectations for this team, just hopeful, wishful, and prayerful. That's nice to hear. Genuinely, like, at a certain point, just root for your team. Like, that's all you can do. I grew up a Giants fan. You know how many years that they were just terrible, just god awful? I'm used to it, and the nice thing about growing up as a Giants fan is you had those 2 Super Bowl seasons. So that at least kind of rescued your mind state when things were atrocious. But like, I remember watching Eli Manning for the last 5 years of his career, being like, man, this guy doesn't have it. I don't get that feeling when I watch the Saints now, but I get that impression from so many people who watch the Saints. And we'll see. Like, maybe they do disappoint to a level that is unseen by human eyes before. But I don't know. Allow that to happen before you're angry about it happening is all I ask. Like, we're past the point where they can change the things that you already disagree with. At a certain point, just, I don't know, clap your hands. Like, come on. We have all offseason to talk about whether they should hire the coach, who they should draft. Now it's time to just watch football and hope for the best. But hey, well, to each their own. I'm not going to begrudge anyone how they choose to fan. I watch football for fun, and that's the message that I will deliver on this podcast. Is watching sports is supposed to be entertainment, and you're supposed to have a good time. And if you're going into a season at 0-0 and cannot just watch a football game and have a good time, I don't know, but we'll see. MB, we'll go full circle here. Ben Watson was and still is pure class. I love Ben Watson. I don't take my Ben Watson was fine comment as me digging on Ben Watson. I think he was better in other places. But Jared, I just think Jared gets a bad rap. Lehman Park says 24-10 final score. And Bayou Flats with a good point says, I'm resentful when I fixate on the years wasted while we had Drew. I agree with that. 100%. But there's nothing this group can do to take away that hurt, and you can't blame Derek for that. Like we can all do what is right and write hate mail to Bill Vinovich, whose address will be posted at the end of this. No, it won't. I'm not going to do that to my boy Bill. But yeah, he's the one we should be mad at is Bill Vinovich. Rich Vital says, great show. The negative statement I heard, or the greatest statement I heard, is by the Panther guy who said, why be so negative before the negative thing has happened and let that ruin your whole week? Yeah. I endorse that. I endorse that comment. But all right. Yeah. Pammy Whammy also points out that Raheem Morris is in the same situation. So I think I pointed this out earlier in the offseason. You look at, like, we hear about Raheem Morris, we hear about Todd Bowles, and there's always positivity in terms of what they have done and what they will do. Both of those guys is in the same boat as Dennis Allen in terms of they are in their second head coaching stint and failed miserably in their first one. Todd Bowles was with the Jets. He had one winning season, then had 3 terrible seasons. Raheem Morris was with the Bucs. I can't recall his exact win-loss total. I think it was 3 seasons. But, like, for whatever reason, it's all positive for these guys. And we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I'm curious how it's going to pan out. I appreciate everyone who's in here leaving a comment. Is another long episode. Thanks again to I keep trying to call him Desmond Howard. He's not Desmond Howard. He's Desmond Johnson, host of the Believe in Carolina Panthers podcast. We got Saints-Panthers on Sunday. We got real football on Sunday. I'm excited about it. Are you excited about it? You should be. Cheap tickets. If you've ever wanted to go to an NFL football game and couldn't afford it, this is your time, because you will not find cheaper tickets, I don't think, for a Saints game, because I think it's combining with the fact that the Panthers were bad, and I wouldn't say they particularly travel well, and combining with this fact that a lot of people are angry at the Saints right now. But I think you can get in there for like $10. If you've ever wanted to go, bring the family for like under $100, I think you could get it done this week. But man, I'm excited. I'm excited to be back on the sideline. I'm excited to continue to do these podcasts, and hopefully we do not have to be having a The Sky is Falling podcast on Sunday night or Monday morning. Woosa, as Lehman Park says. Woosa, or Goose Fraba. Is there any anger management fans in here? Goose, blah, blah. All right. This is Inside Black and Gold. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Who dat? Go Saints. Be easy, y'all. Peace.